Gary, this has been an amazing conversation. I wasn't sure where we were going to go, and holy shit, you really came through. Thanks. I'm glad I could help share the word on what you're doing, and not only that, but I'm glad that there are guys out there. I mean, I know there are, right? Everybody knows Jesse Gould and a lot of the bigger names, but you're like in the trenches in Louisiana doing the thing. All right, welcome back to the Alternative Flight Plan podcast. This is where we explore the healing paths your conventional medical provider may never mention or even know about. We're all about finding creative solutions to complex problems, which is critical in healthcare today. And so I've stepped out of the ready room into the treatment room to share some of these with you. Today, I'm joined by Gary Hess. Gary is a former Marine infantry officer who, in his own words, has found his way back from years of unresolved trauma, moral injury, and the failures of a broken medical health system through connection, community, and a courageous exploration of healing plants once considered off limits. Gary is the Director of Advocacy and Peer Support for the Veterans Mental Health Leadership Coalition, and he's the founder of VAHA, which is the Veterans Alliance for Holistic Alternatives, and the founder of Teleleaf Warrior and Tribe Assembly. He's a trauma recovery coach and an advocate for peer-led healing. So we're going to talk about entheogenic medicine again. However, it's the backdrop of a larger picture, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from Gary on his larger picture. So let's strap into our ejection seats. Let's taxi to the catapult and get airborne. Gary, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I talk a lot about plant medicines, but I don't think I have yet to talk about cannabis, which is really interesting because I do prescribe I have in my scope of practice, I can prescribe cannabis for medical reasons here in Washington State. And so I see a lot of how cannabis can help folks. I'm curious how you've used it in perhaps your own personal journey and how you use that with other veterans that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, honestly, we could talk the whole podcast about this because, no, cannabis was incredible. Cannabis was my first medicine, and continuing to work with cannabis with intention throughout my healing journey. I would consider cannabis as a master medicine, and I'll tell you why. When I first started using cannabis, I just knew that it did everything that the medicines were supposed to do, right? I didn't understand the dynamics, kinetics. I didn't understand the science behind it. But I knew it just, I didn't know it at the time, but cannabis was a somatic enhancer. It became a somatic gateway. And at the time, in the depths of my struggle, my mind and body were so disconnected that any sensation in my body would drive a panic attack, right? So I could not get into my body. I stayed in my mind, and I built a story to reinforce the habits and avoidance behaviors and isolation and everything that my life had become. And at the source of trust from a good friend, one of my Marine snipers that I brought down with me, who was struggling. I brought him home to live with me and gave him employment. When he found me in my depths of struggle, he just asked me a simple question. He said, "Hey, Gary, do you trust me?" And I said, "Yes, I do. Yes, I do." And he said, "Will you try this?" And I said, "Yes, I will." And I tried it, and it did everything the medicines were supposed to do. It brought balance to my primal functions of eating, sleeping, digestion, memory, emotional regulation, and arousal to sleep-wake cycles. It shut the noise off. It reduced the hypervigilance and the hyperarousal, and allowed me to feel what was actually going on in my body. It allowed me to sit within the emotions and stay, right, and not get busy or avoid. And when I started understanding the power of this medicine, I started using it proactively and reactively. I started using it with intention to reverse my stress response, to bring me into a calmer state, to knowingly enter a triggering situation, produce a different outcome. And so I started using cannabis to teach my body that these situations were safe again. And with the intentional use of cannabis, I catalyzed post-traumatic growth in a way that it was pretty significant. But it got to a point where I couldn't get deep enough, right? I knew there was things that were still triggering me. The anger was still very much present. And that's what pushed me into to go further and explore the psychedelic assisted therapies like psilocybin and bufo. But with cannabis, that was probably for a good 3-year period from 2016 to 2019. Very intentional use, right? A lot of it, I had to overcome the stigma being raised here in the deep South. And, I was ready to shoot myself in the face before I smoked a joint. And then I smoked a joint and it did everything that the medicines were supposed to do. And I'm like, there's something here, right? I'm in a situation at the end of a decade of trying every option to heal within a Western model. At the end of a decade, my conditions became worse. And here I was thinking that the best option was to take my own life. And it was not emotional. It was not impulsive. It was because I had tried everything that the Western model had offered, and my conditions became worse. And I felt that this world would be better off without me. And it was a logical decision. And then I smoked a joint that did everything the medicines were supposed to do. And I'm like, holy shit, there's something here, right? I'm going to find that answer. And at that time in my struggle, I had nothing left. I sold off the little that I did own. I locked myself in my garage. And with the intentional use of cannabis and some very deep research, and I found the answers that I was looking for. So with that, I've continued to train using cannabis and breath work as a somatic gateway. I'm actually a trained psychedelic somatic interactional therapy, psychotherapy practitioner, which uses cannabis to override the secondary consciousness and to access our primary consciousness and allow that energy to actually complete itself. And so it's an emerging therapy, but it's incredible, and that's something we can get deeper into. So when you ask me about my opinion on cannabis and how I've used it to heal, there's a lot of information there. There's a very long story. There's actually a book coming out about it, and the majority of it is about cannabis. Um, it's a conversation. It's a plant that's not very well understood, but once you understand the therapeutic uses of it, it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah. I hear 2 things. I feel like there is a deep betrayal with the conventional medical system, and how we treat people with trauma, and that's not just veterans, that's first responders, that's people that were victims of sexual assault, whatever it happens to be, and we're fed this line that if we do what the conventional system has, we'll feel better, and that's simply not true, and there's the second betrayal of, well, we have this other medicine that might work, but you can't use it because it's for losers and hippies, and that just feels so not genuine and so not aligned with what like you keep saying, they did what the plant medicine is supposed to do. It's like, why aren't these things more accessible? The reason I started with cannabis, I think, is because it is something that is a little bit more accessible to the average person. Psychedelics still seem pretty out there for a lot of folks.
The problem with cannabis is, I wouldn't say the problem is a recreational market. I think the problem is the consumer sales strategy, right? Is they're creating these uh, convenient products that are high in THC that reduce the odor. They isolate the major minor cannabinoids and the terpenes, and they reformulate, and they're terrible products. So it's the actual plant, the raw plant, and a dry herb vaporizer is probably the best consumption method for therapeutic use.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes I've made in having patients who are using cannabis, because they don't just come to me for the prescription. They're like, "Well, how do I use it?" I'm like, "Well, go talk to the guy at the dispensary. He should know," and they don't.
No, not even close.
Yeah, the only reason I figured that out is because, I know one of the guys local here in Port Townsend who, is writing a book on cannabis, and it's not about THC, it's about the CBD, the CBG, and the CBN, and the other phytochemicals that are so potent, but, he is the one person I feel confident saying, "If you go see this person, he will teach you how to use this medicine." So I'm curious how you learned. Like, how did you learn your way through this?
Yeah, yeah, just self-taught, right? I needed to understand. Here I am in a situation where I can't shut the body off, and I'm angry, and rage just surfaces, and everything in that moment feels absolutely right. And when I consumed cannabis, it was almost like a dimmer switch that that I, um, that operated very quickly, and I can just turn that dimmer down, and all of a sudden, I'm fully present, right? And it sparked a curiosity that here's these 11 medications that I was prescribed that is supposed to bring me into a calm state, into the present, where my body feels like it's in balance and bring all of these primal functions into balance, right? But when I take these 11 medications, I'm a zombie and I'm suicidal. But here it is, a natural plant that I consume. It does everything that these medicines are supposed to do. There is something here, right away. My body, right when your body knows, it gets that direct knowing. There is something here. And the first thing that came to me, excuse my language, but I'm like, these fuckers are lying to me. They've been lying to me, right? Here is a natural plant, and I understand why you're going to make it illegal, because you're going to start reducing some of the need for the pharmaceuticals, and now you're cutting into capital profits. And I'm like, oh, okay, I see it. But they're too big to fight, right? So it's just, I'm not going to go out and fight these guys. I can't. So I made a commitment that I'm going to learn this plant. I'm going to learn how to use it. I'm going to learn the kinetics and the dynamics. I need to understand what PTSD actually is. Hyperarousal in the amygdala, hypoarousal in the prefrontal cortex. When you consume cannabis, those two aspects of the brain literally reverse itself. It leads to hyperarousal in the prefrontal cortex, and it shuts the animal brain off, calms it down. These two parts of the brain start communicating again. And when that happens, learning is possible. Learning that situations are safe again become possible. And so once I started understanding this, here I can consume a little bit of cannabis. I can put myself going to that sushi restaurant that I cannot sit for more than 15 minutes before ejecting. And now I'm making it all the way through dinner, and I'm creating a positive outcome with my significant other, my wife, and we have a good time. And now I'm teaching my body that this situation is safe again. But at the same time, now I have a tool that when I don't plan it, and I'm triggered and I'm in a restaurant or I'm at a social event or somewhere with my wife, right? Now I have a post trigger, right? Or I can use it reactively where I'm triggered. My body is being mobilized. My blood pressure is going through the roof. Anger is very present. And now I can consume cannabis. And within 2 to 4 minutes, right, here I am again. So I have a very effective tool to regulate the chronic stress response, which is killing us, right? Which is killing the veteran community. The imbalance in the HPA axis, the cortisol, the adrenaline that continues to flood our system from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed has us out of balance. It is chronic stress, right? They call it allostatic load. They call it the operator syndrome, but it's the chronic stress that cannot shut off, right? We don't go into a parasympathetic state. We're staying in a very high sympathetic state, in a very aroused state of being. And we run out of fuel, and it breaks down the motor, and our bodies start breaking down, and then mentally just degrades us until it's like, I can't do this shit anymore.
I think one of the things that people don't appreciate, and this goes for, first responders, firefighters, police, EMTs, is the depth of the problem and how deep somebody must be down a black hole if the solution is to put a gun in their mouth. And I think perhaps if people understood just what it was like to feel that way, that perhaps they would judge how we're trying to get out of this hole a little bit less, or a little bit less harshly, with a little bit more curiosity. I'm curious, now that you've experienced that yourself and you've got this intentional tool, and I think it's important to look at it like it's a tool, because, even propranolol is a tool. Meditation is a tool. Psychedelic medicines are tools. And tools can be misused or they can be used appropriately. Now that you have this appropriately used tool, how are you sharing it with other veterans, and how are you spreading the word on the effectiveness in this tool?
Yeah, when I found these answers with cannabis, and let me back up a little bit. Um, as an infantry officer in the Marine Corps, experienced some very significant deployments that were very kinetic, and there was a lot of loss of life, both combatants and non-combatants. The non-combatants have been the most difficult to live with. But that at the end of my second deployment, the day after Christmas in '06, they drove a full-size dump truck loaded with C4 into the house we were occupying and detonated, and took a great friend of mine. And from there, everything shifted. And so I came home and turned my hands over to the Western model of medicine, and it was pharmaceuticals and surgeries and talk therapy, prolonged exposure, cognitive behavioral group therapy, EMDR. I mean, you name it. And at the end of the decade, the best answer was taking my own life. Right. So my journey to cannabis was not a short one. I didn't just show up one day and say, "Hey, what weed? Let me try it." No, I was literally at a point where I was ready to take my own life before I consumed it because of the stigmas that it carried. Because if growing up, if I talked about weed or psychedelics in my own home, my father and my grandfather would whip my ass. My mother as well. It just did not happen. So it carried a lot of weight. It carried a lot of shame that I even had to get to this point. And then it worked. And then I'm like, you know what? The truth is, I don't want to die. I have a 6-month-old son, and I want to be a father for my son, and I want to be here for my wife. And there's something here, and I'm going to find those answers. And so I did find the answers. I put in a significant amount of work before I even came out publicly and started talking about cannabis. And when the time was right, I testified in front of Louisiana Congress. I became the very first medical cannabis patient here in Louisiana. I legalized medical cannabis in Louisiana, became the first patient. And then I started the Veterans Alliance for Holistic Alternative for education and advocacy, and started assisting and the legalization for medical access for veterans in the Carolinas and Texas and Kansas and just a number of other states. And then I was also asked to sit on the National Cannabis Roundtable to assist in the federal conversation. And so it was initially education and advocacy, but now I have a private practice as a transformational recovery coach, understanding the properties, therapeutic potential of cannabis as a somatic gateway, and I do a lot of somatic therapy with veterans and trauma survivors using cannabis. I do a lot of breath work to pull the mind out of the body, to go to the place beyond time and space, so that we can see in a different perspective and shift a different perspective. And it is an incredibly potent and powerful medicine if you know how to use it.
Well, I would agree with you that, I mean, to be honest, I think I've only been in a cannabis shop, um, 3 times total in my life, and one of them was actually to buy some a topical product for pain management, but, when I walk in there, they just don't resonate with me. They're bright and glittery, and they scream commercialism, which, doesn't sit well with me, but I hope to see I think it's one of the reasons that, cannabis doesn't take a deeper hold as a therapeutic agent because of this other model that I don't think it's just me that finds that uncomfortable, but it sounds like the work that you're doing is helping to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, and even the cannabis conversation, right? Starting, I don't know, about 3 years ago, trying to have this conversation and advance the therapeutic use of cannabis. It's like jumping in the mud waist deep and trying to run. It just it's so clouded with the recreational market and the and then the I guess the tobacco or the vape shops that are popping up with the hemp, alternatives. And there's just there's more bad products out there than there are good products. And then where you can find the good products, the pure flower, it's hard to find a terpene profile associated with them, right? The magic for cannabis is in the phytochemicals. It's in the terpene, right? That's what creates the experience. And in most cases, and especially in the developed markets, that information is not available, right? They might list the top 2 or 3, but if you can understand the terpene profile and understand how that affects your user experience and get really dialed in with that, that's an incredible medicine. Incredible.
Absolutely. It's one of the interesting things about cannabis is that, when you look at the actual contents, they mirror other medicines like magnolia and sage and thyme, which, seem like ordinary herbs, but thyme is a potent medicinal herb. Magnolia is a potent medicinal herb, and cannabis has all of them. So it's not like you have to take 10 other herbs. You like just cannabis in the right amounts, like you said. But I look forward to having um, a medical. I don't want to say industry because that even just even saying industry sounds like capitalism and marketing, but a medical type of, I guess let's just use the word establishment so that we can get more medicinally out of the cannabis and not just this recreational high. Like, let's use it as the product it was intended for.
Yeah, I look forward to this being streamlined in our medical institutions where it's taught the practical application of intentional cannabis use, especially for trauma survivors, is taught at an institutional level. I think we're a ways from that, uh, but the doctors, the medical experiences that we have today, they're doing what they're taught, right? The polypharmacy strategy, they're doing what they're taught because of the monetary influence that governs their education process, and it's hidden. It's hidden in everything.
I'm a naturopathic doctor, and so I went to a naturopathic medical school, which does everything that conventional medical schools do, but we also talk a lot more about nutrition and plants. And two plants that were missing from that conversation were notably cannabis and theogenic medicine. And if the naturopathic schools aren't talking about it, certainly nobody else is going to. So this is definitely an uphill battle, like you said, going for a swim in a mud bog. But I hope that voices like you can help change the tide on that a little bit.
Yeah, and the reason it's moving so slow, just cut and dry, is you're pushing against the institutional barriers that control the capital profits in this country, right? When you start pushing against that, it's not going to move fast. But the world's in a situation, this country is in a situation where they demand change, right? They don't trust what is there. So do it at the community level, right? And that's where we focus as we go to the individuals in the community, because at the end of the day, the tribe, the community is what has been lost, and that is the real medicine.
Wow, I couldn't agree with you more. That's a great segue, by the way, because a lot of what you do is about trauma recovery coach, advocate for peer-led healing. Like peer-led healing should be that's the mantra for veteran healthcare right there. Share a little bit about what you're doing in that regard and how you're working holistic stuff into helping veterans feel better.
Yeah. So after the education and advocacy, um, when we created VAHA, it was uncomfortable for me to go out and ask for money. So with the understanding of cannabis and how to use it with therapeutic intention, I created a medical cannabis access platform called Teleleaf. Right now, was a for-profit entity. We have physician groups throughout the United States, and that's what fueled all of our for-profit activities. Now, VAHA is the education and advocacy, but where this voice comes from is our ground level operations, which is the Warrior Tribe Medicinal Assembly or the Warrior Tribe Assembly. And this is our community healing retreats for veterans, first responders, and trauma survivors. And we use both cannabis and entheogenic medicines as tools to process some of these deeply embedded emotions that has our autonomic nervous system out of balance. And we do that within community. And the whole purpose behind our programs is to find the authenticity, to gain acceptance for who we are, right? To find words for those experiences that we've had no words for, to say them in front of others, to be accepted for who we are, and then gain agency over our own lives. And so, from individual coaching to group led community retreats, we have found an incredible stabilization platform for those who are on the X, right? For those who are out of options. It's undeniable, uh, the results that we achieve. And for those who are out of options and they come to us in a transformation that they go through during our programs. And so,
One of the things I hear from veterans and first responders about getting involved in retreats like this or programs like this is I can't afford it. What's your response to that?
well, that's why we exist. For people like myself who couldn't afford it or didn't have the courage to go outside of the country, there is absolutely no cost for veterans and first responders to come through our program. So as long as you can take care of your travel to get to us, the preparation on the front end, the 4-day retreat, and then the integration on the back end is no cost to you.
how are you using community? How are you sharing community? I think, and this is like I have one perspective in the world. I'm a woman, and even though I spent a total of 27 years in uniform, my perspective is still as a woman in the uniform. Um, and I don't know what it's like to be a dude. But what I can see from the outside is that men aren't allowed to emote, men are allowed to cry, and they're told to suck it up. And I'm curious how you're using a little bit of that peer led and that community medicine to help guys get in touch with that, because there's no healing without getting in touch with that.
That was my biggest struggle, right? I had to be the tough dude. I had to be the disciplined dude, just to be able to tough it out. And here's a great example. We have a retreat upcoming. So when you talk about peer led, this is a Marine who is now in the private contracting industry, a Marine that I served with almost 20 years ago. He's now in the private contracting industry, and he's on the X right now. He's just in a tough spot. Life has caught up with him. Everything that's been unprocessed is catching up with him, and life has fallen apart. And he reached out because he was out of options. And one of the things, this is a real conversation that transpired last week. He said, I joined a group within the VA, and I asked him, I said, have you been? And he's like, yeah, I've been to a couple. And he says, sir, they don't have any freaking grunts in the group, right? Nobody understands me. And so that's it. He's shut off. It's not going to work. And so now the program that he's coming to this coming weekend are people just like him, right? Pararescue, pararescue guys coming in, significant levels of trauma, Ford air controller, and a couple other infantry guys, but all who have lived a very similar experience that can resonate with each other. And so just by me being present and listening to the gentleman across from me share his story, right? Now I'm heard. Now I'm seen. Now I feel confident that I can share my own, because I'm just like you said, that you're not a dude, right? I'm also not a woman. So bringing people with like experiences together, so I don't have to get into the nittiest grittiest detail to try to help you explain what it is that I'm feeling, right? There's already a sense of knowing. And it's like, brother, I know. I don't even have to say a word, but I know, and I'm right here with you. I see you. It is hard. There is a lot of shame. There is a lot of guilt. I'm gonna sit in it with you right here together, right? And as they sit in it, they don't run from it, right? They minimize the coping strategies and they just surrender. And this is the big thing coming in as a community. And when you tell these men and women to surrender, right? If you would have told me that a decade ago, I'd have had some very choice words for you. My body doesn't know what that is, right? So in the preparation process coming in with each of these men and women who come through, we teach the mechanisms of surrender. We understand how to use the breath. We use ice bath. We use breath work. And the key here is to surrender and to feel. And our job is to create a container that allows them to feel safe with the other men and women that they're coming through with, so they can just absolutely surrender and feel, and whatever comes up, to let it come up. And it's coming up in front of like-minded peers. And so when they're able to say these things out loud in front of others and be accepted for who they are now, and then gain agency over their life, you see the transformation, right? The medicines are tools. Coming into this, my role as a lead facilitator in these retreat programs is, one, to share my own story. Once upon a time, I was a tough son of a bitch, right? And I would say, hey, follow me. We're going to go into a shitty situation and we're probably not going to come out, but we're going to get it done. And there was no emotion, right? And there was no question. And now I'm the first one to tell you that, when's the last time you cried, brother? When is the last time you fully cried and just sat in it? Right? So by the end of this retreat, I can send you pictures. I'm holding these grown ass men in my arms, just bawling, and I'm crying with them. We are emotional beings. The emotions are supposed to flow through us. It's the energy, right? But when those painful, unprocessed emotions come in, those emotions come through us, grab them, we hold on to them, we suppress them. They stay within us. That weight accumulates over time, right? This is the allostatic load. It keeps your body in motion. Your body is never at rest. It never achieves that homeostatic balance, right? It is always in motion. Even when you're sleeping, you are still in a hyper aroused state. We create an incredible container, an incredible program, and some incredible strategies to bring like-minded individuals together with similar experiences to share the shame and to allow those emotions to fully complete themselves and to be released from the body, right? And that starts bringing internal balance. So I don't know if that answered your question. There's just a lot here, but our ground level operations, the things that I see of these men who call me and said, I can't go anymore. And I'm like, yes, you can, brother. Come with me. And they do. And I see the stabilization. I see the reconnection with themselves. I see the reconnection with their family. I don't give a shit what your science says. These men and women are dying, and I'm not going to sit around and watch it. And to see what transpires and a stabilization that transpires to mitigate the suicide and the opioid epidemic that we're living through right now, right? This is a conversation that needs to be had, and access needs to be given at the state and federal level to these treatment modalities.
Well, Gary, I would submit that you're still one tough son of a bitch. Um, yeah, it takes an immense amount of courage to do what you're doing just because of the face of in the face of the cultural limitations that we've set for ourselves. Um, I, I resonated a lot what you said about avoidance and how we use things for avoidance. And how avoidance kind of keeps us safe, but it's not sustainable. And it wasn't until I started plant medicine that I was actually able to get rid of some of those and start meditating myself. I do realize how important that is. What's the after like for guys that are going to your retreats? Where do they find themselves, 6 months later, a year later, or longer as a result of sitting with you and your team?
The most important answer is still here. Yeah, that's it. And look, they're doing great. And some of the things that we monitor in our program is HRV, the quality of sleep. Right, those things will tell the story, resting heart rate, and you can do that through simple biometrics. But one of the difficult things with the entheogenic medicines is some of these experiences are so profound, right? It gives you a blueprint for what his life is supposed to be, and you feel it at the same time. You can see it clearly, you feel it at the same time, and then you go back and you experience their critical learning windows anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months, whether it's psilocybin or ibogaine or ayahuasca, right? But you go in kind of that honeymoon phase. But um, what people don't realize, that I see a lot in this space, is they go in without the preparation and they come out without a quality integration program. And what they don't realize is, yes, you have seen the blueprint and it is very clear, but now it's time to take the blueprint and start the construction process. You have to commit to the integration on the backside, right? And what that integration is self-care, because you're being thrust back into a disconnected world, right? This phone, your job, financial security, everything. It's just going to start pulling at your mind and drive you into that worrisome state. So it's the self-care, right? The tools that we can use to come back to center, to reconnect with ourselves, to find presence, the ice bath, the breath work, the meditation, right? They come in, we teach these tools, but we also enforce these tools on the back end. And so those clients or participants that we monitor with HRV, which is essentially the quarterback rating for your autonomic nervous system. And what we'll see a rapid increase immediately after, right, for the next 2 weeks. And then we'll see, it'll come down a little bit and then it'll start to go up again. And it's kind of a stair step. It looks like a technical analysis, right? But it's a continual increase over time. But the things that you cannot really quantify, you can't quantify spirit, right? You can't quantify the fact that you took the exiled parts of this individual's soul and you brought them back together, right, and made them whole again, and allows the spirit to manifest in a way that it hasn't in a very long time. And it creates reconnection with family. It creates different outcomes financially and professionally. It creates different relationships with significant others and children. And right. So when you ask how these men and women are doing, um, sometimes there aren't words. The fact that they're still here and they're still with their families and their families are together and their kids are thriving. You're on the right path and doing the right thing.
Yeah. Where do you see yourself in a couple years? Where do you want this to go?
I'll be honest. I would love a lot of things. Ground level operations for people who need access. We The best programs that are being run right now are peer led. Right, those with lived experience who are leading others with like experience through these programs. Right. And this is something that the VA Secretary Collins has spoken about. And we've heard the conversation and chatter thrown around that they're going to start issuing vouchers for community based programs. Right. In a couple years, I would love to be one of those community based programs because the truth is, these men and women are still dying. Right. These men and women who are coming through my program this next weekend are still fighting the same crisis we were talking about 20 years ago. It's not going anywhere. Nothing's changing. And we still don't have an access point at the federal or state levels other than clinical trials, which most veterans, including myself, get denied for because they're too risky.
I tell you where I'd like to see it, not only helping the veterans that are on the other side of service, but the veterans that are currently in service, so they're not coming back needing these things. They've already like it's part of you go out on a mission and then you come back and you go through this, you call it a protocol or whatever, and we keep you healthy in the middle of it instead of waiting till the other end when you've got a gun in your mouth and saying, "Oh, well, maybe you need some help."
There are incredibly effective ways, right? MDMA, what an incredible tool that can be utilized for active duty service members, right? Um, it's a conversation, right? It's education that needs to happen at every level, right? Most of the senior leadership in the military, right, are still stigmatized by what they think these medicines are to be. I was the same one, right? I was the one that the infantry officer in the Marine Corps that you popped on a piss test, zero tolerance, right? You come work for my heavy and civil contracting firm, right outside of the service, uh, no tolerance, right? But then through lived experience, you gain a different perspective and it's okay. It's not what I thought it was. Right. But the truth is, how can you ignore the numbers? Right. And what you're seeing in the veteran community right now is being paralleled by our youth, the suicide rates. Right. This is an ongoing problem that is not going anywhere. And when you start affecting the children and mothers and fathers don't have answers from their medical providers, right, they're going to start looking elsewhere for answers. There needs to be safe, legal, supervised access to these therapeutic modalities, the entheogenic medicines, right? However you want to bring them to the table, but bring them because now is the time.
Yeah, I don't know why we're still okay with so many people taking their own lives. It's mind-blowing to me.
Here's the other thing that I just wanted to mention, and what the clinical model is failing um, to address is the moral and spiritual aspects of our wounds, which comes with guilt and shame, right? And guilt and shame are very different. Guilt is I feel bad for the things that I have done. When shame becomes the overriding emotion, I am no longer a good person. I am a bad person for the things that I have done. I don't deserve joy. I don't deserve happiness, right? And the spiritual aspects, the spirituality, right? What is our purpose in life? Why are we here? We come out of the service for those who are affected with moral injury, and we have a loss of identity and we have a loss of purpose. Right? And it is just something that's not being addressed. They don't address the moral or spiritual aspects of these wounds in a clinical setting. It's just not even a conversation. And so if this is the root of the problem, and we know the clinical model is not even touching the root of the problem, this just needs to be a conversation that something is being missed here. And this is why these entheogenic platforms or modalities or these entheogenic medicines are such incredible tools, because they address the moral and spiritual aspects of our existence, right? And so the men and women who come out of this, they find, right, some of the most common things you hear, and it was mine in the very beginning. I came out of my first ceremony and I'm like, I know who I am and I know my purpose. I'd been lost forever, it felt like. And it's just an overriding theme that continues to happen. I know who I am. I know my purpose, right? I'm not shaped or dictated by my past experiences. I can live in the present. So I just wanted to share that. The moral injury aspect is I'd say 8, 9 out of 10 of people, you ask what if they understand what moral injury is, and they would tell you no. But that is the root of the problem.
I think we could probably do a lot more with educating people, and that's not just people in the military or the service, but people, like, in general, of what moral injury is and how deeply it can be pervasively negative on somebody's experience. Uh, I continue to be blown away that in 2025, I'm sitting here having conversations about spirituality and psychedelic medications with a former Marine infantry officer. So well done. Like, like, let's continue carrying the banner.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say that, and I think those were words out of my mouth this year. Is I joined as the director of advocacy and peer support for the Veterans Mental Health Leadership Coalition, which is led by a retired 3-star Marine Corps general, and it was probably within the first couple months. We're sitting in D.C., and I find myself sitting at the table waiting for a lawmaker to come in, and I'm just like, I never would have thought in a million years that I'd be sitting next to a 3-star general talking about psychedelic medicine, right? It just blows my mind, but it's real and it's necessary. And they have some big players that are stepping to the table, and thank goodness, because I can't say this enough. Since the inception of combat in 2001, we've lost just over 7,000 service members. In that same period of time, we've lost over 240,000 to suicide and drug overdose. If that doesn't paint a clear picture of where the problem is, I don't know what does.
I think that bears repeating. So 7,000 lost in combat and 240,000 lost in suicide and drug overdose.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Let's not ignore it anymore.
Mm.
It's part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Gary, this has been an amazing conversation. I wasn't sure where we were going to go, and holy shit, you really came through. Thanks. I'm glad I could help share the word on what you're doing, and not only that, but I'm glad that there are guys out there. I mean, I know there are, right? Everybody knows Jesse Gould and a lot of the bigger names, but you're like in the trenches in Louisiana doing a thing.
Yeah, so, here's the truth is you have Heroic Hearts Project, you have Beyond Service, what I began, you have Ambio, you have, New Life, right, or The Mission Within, right? All credible, incredible organizations doing incredible work. But you know what? They don't have an open slot for the next year. I have guy there are guys that call me that they're not gonna make it a week, right? I just I'm in a position where I have lost more men to suicide than I have in combat, and that helplessness is something I will never feel again, ever, watching my men and women die, ever. So when I receive a call, I have an answer, and I'm gonna be here providing answers until somebody makes me go away.
I think it's the best part about being part of the veteran community is knowing that we don't just sit around, we take charge and make things happen. So, and as to the comment about losing more comrades to suicide than combat, that just like what the ever living fuck is that? So we've got a lot of work to do. Um, but I'm glad to hear that you're out there saving lives one at a time. That's about all we can do for right now. Gary, I can only assume that you have a couple of organizations that you'd like to share some websites or social media platforms. How can people donate? How can they help? As I say, every podcast, for every person out there that says, thank you for your service, say, thank you for your service. And how can I help? How can they help you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I would say if you are a veteran, first responder, or trauma survivor in need, go to warriortribeassembly.com and fill out the intake form, right? Hop on a list. There's no waiting. If you're in need, we'll find a way. And, for those who are looking for education and advocacy, look at the Veterans Alliance for Holistic Alternatives. These are all organizations that are driving the same mission. And we're going to keep driving that mission as well as shape the conversations at the state and the national level. So we're in it for the long haul.
Awesome. Well, Gary, I am very grateful that we had you on the show. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's do it
uh,
again.
yeah, well, I plan on being around for a while until, somebody shuts me down. I'm gonna be, sharing where everything I can about alternative medicine, holistic medicine, and psychedelic medicine, just because of the impact I've seen it have on colleagues that I know, naval aviators, but also my own personal journey into that. So, with that said, if you're in Washington State and you want to consult with me, I'm available in person in Port Townsend. I'm also available via telemedicine. You can find me on meridianpassagewellness.com. You can find me on all the social medias. Dr. Kristin Barnes on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, yeah, whatever. You know how to find me. So look me up. And if you know anybody who needs to hear this, please share. So like, subscribe, share, get the word out, help us help other veterans and first responders, people who are surviving trauma, and let's change the way our country looks at mental illness. So thanks for listening in. Gary, again, it was great to have you. And for my audience, we'll talk to you next time. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you.